Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sophia Wardell, and today we have a very special guest, romance author and marketing expert, Johnnie London. Johnnie London is a former Marine, a distinguished advertising executive, and a romance novelist. Johnnie draws on his experiences to craft stories exploring love, regret, and time travel. He also continues to excel in advertising, creating compelling stories and campaigns for brands and businesses. Thanks for joining us today, Johnnie.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Of course, thank you for coming back on. And today I want to discuss author branding with you. So, Johnnie, what do you believe are the essential components of a strong author brand in the romance genre?
Personality.
Mm,
I think, I think especially for an author that's starting out, I think you have to have a personality, a presence, a point of view that comes through in social media when you're doing a reading, other things like that, that people want to know more about the author and then what the author has to say.
fantastic. And could you provide an example of how you've evolved your brand to stay relevant in ever-changing book markets?
Well, let's face it, a guy my age, writing romance novels. I mean, it's just starting there. It's like, what's up with this guy?
Right.
Okay, but I do think though that in this particular market, in this particular day and age, I think there is room for a guy's point of view from a romance novel perspective. I think if you look at cinema right now, whether you love him or not, if you look at the character of Rip on Yellowstone, this is a guy that's pretty ruthless and he's pretty raw. But when it comes to his wife, Beth, in the series, the guy's mush.
Mm,
So I think that can exist, and I don't know there's a lot of it out there. If you look at Guy Ritchie and the characters he writes, The Gentleman most recently with Matthew McConaughey, pretty ruthless dude, drug dealer, has to do what he has to do to run his business. But when it comes to his wife, nobody. That's sacred to him. That is something that's more important than anything. And it occurred to me that there might be room for more characters like that and be able to tell that story. And I think, without sounding like too much of a jerk, but I think though that there's a certain group of women, readers, and just women in general, who are equals in every step of the way, side by side through life, but also like to know that the man they're with can protect and provide and be a leader, be, as much as a follower, but can be all of those things together at any given time. And so trying to figure out how to tell that story in a way where it's collaborative and it's a friendship and it's loving, but at the same time though, it's like that old phrase, would you rather be a gardener in a war or a warrior in a garden? I think guys can be tough, they can go work hard, they could sacrifice a lot for their family, but also still have the woman in their life be just on a pedestal, be that queen that they want her to be. And it isn't condescending, it isn't patronizing, it's respecting her and just wanting to do everything they can to give the life that he wants to have with somebody in a way that people would respect and believe in. I hope that doesn't sound weird, but I think there's a lot of that out there. There should
Well,
be.
first of all, I will say that I want to be in that story. Like I love that narrative, and I think that especially encouraging men to write romance, it gives you a fresh take on it from the man's perspective. And I do think there's a large audience for that that still loves those values and loves the way that you talked about that. So no, I think that's excellent advice. And I want to transition a little bit and talk about promotion. What
Uh,
other companies do you partner with to help promote your book and brand?
Well, certainly influencers are the big one in terms of who I would partner with. People that are similar and and have similar likes, similar. So I work with a lot of influencers to try and get the message out there. And I think also looking at the content of the book, there naturally is some things in there. And partners to me is so like the characters in my book, music is a big piece of the puzzle. And so when you open the book, the first thing you see is a playlist. And it even says, you can listen to this while you're reading just to enjoy the book a little bit more. And we did a playlist and put it up on Spotify. So is Spotify a partner or is it Dua Lipa to the Eagles to the Grateful Dead to, some old jazz track at Christmas time in the book? Is it that? Does that set the tone for what you can expect based on the movie you hear? The characters in the book also love to go out and eat. They eat at a lot of fancy restaurants. They drink a lot of fancy drinks from our French 75 to, champagne to just beer, depending on what they're doing. and promoting that out, highlighting that in social media or in other things. Is it a partnership, or does it just present the world that you can immerse yourself in when you're reading the story? And you know, if those are the types of things that get you interested, food, drink, and music, culture, fancy restaurants, travel, and things like that, well, it kind of sets an expectation. I could see that. I could resonate. Okay, you got my attention. I actually happen to like a French 75, or I happen to like a Manhattan mixed a certain way with extra bitters. Okay, so it isn't so much trying to go buy promote a paid sponsorship with Brown Forman and Jack Daniels, or Diageo and and Johnny Walker, or Bollinger for champagne. It's more about setting an environment, creating this world that I can dive into as a reader and be familiar with. I get it. He talks about the sound of his favorite sound in the world is the sound of that cork popping out of a champagne bottle. Ice in a crystal cut glass where he pours his whiskey.
Right.
She reaches across her to grab her champagne, but reaches further and grabs his whiskey and takes a sip of his whiskey, and she kisses him with whiskey on her lips. That's the partnership and the promotion that go, ooh, okay,
Right.
I'd like to be in that position, or I could see myself in that position. And brought to you by Johnny Walker, brought to you by Jack Daniels, brought to you by Bollinger Champagne. Okay. So that's how I look at it, because that's about as close as you're going to get early days anyways. And I think though, for those that do reach a high stature, the last thing they're going to do then is sell out to, a particular brand, but they want to integrate those brands into their story.
Right. I love that. I think that coming from not only the male perspective for romance, but the marketing background that you have has really helped you kind of integrate some of these clever ideas and brands and foods and music into your story. And I did want to ask you a little bit about your social mission as well, about suicide prevention.
Yeah. So suicide it's a theme that's in the book. The book
Mhm.
opens up with text messages from the main character's ex-fiance saying, "The universe has spoken. I'm done." And we get to see a chapter where something similar to that happens. Um, I also wanted to be very careful as an author not to present something that treats it as dignified as possible. Everything works out fine, but dignified as possible. So I reached out to a couple different organizations. And the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, I went deep with, and we spent a lot of time. They read everything, and they looked for, are there triggers in there? Are things that are going to help somebody overcome this, which they felt there were. And so they allowed us to um, say that we're donating a portion of our proceeds to them. Now, I was very careful about that. So the only acknowledgement is on the inside of the book itself. It's not on the back cover. It's not on the front cover. You won't know that there's this donation if you're buying the book randomly until you buy it and then you see it there. Because I didn't want to trade off of that, but I also wanted to treat that part of the storyline with enough dignity, where it was treated in a way that it was fair.
Right.
I'm a veteran. 22 veterans a day are killing themselves because of what they came home to, or because they don't have the resources they need. And so
Mm.
AFSP is more about mental health way before. That they're not who you call if you're in the middle of thinking you're going to do something. They're who you go to long before if you're starting to feel a certain way. And I wanted to be associated with that because I think mental health is something that, especially men's mental health, as well as mental health in general, I think is something that we don't give enough attention to. And so, because it was part of it, I didn't want to put something out there that it wasn't at least looked at or vetted by an organization that I trust and respect to say, yeah, you handled it in a dignified way. And because it resolves itself positively through positively addressing the issue, they felt that they would be willing to work with us. And they promoted the book for us, um, into just through their organization.
Well, that's fantastic just for promotion and just for integrating on that social mission and for knowing your partners. What, Johnny, would you say would be the biggest piece of advice that you could give to new romance authors about building and nurturing their author brand?
Regardless of how crazy the story is, regardless of where you want to take it, and there's all kinds of levels. It has to be grounded in some level of authenticity so that the reader can associate with it. If you look, probably the easiest way to explain it is, and mine deals with time travel, but if you look at any movie that takes place in some distant future or in the past, or it's a whole different kind of world. If they're walking down the street, you'll see you'll see a U.S. post office box on the corner. You'll see the New York Times on the corner. You'll see somebody referencing something that happened in culture that's real. So it gives a grounding to the story that it isn't complete fantasy land, that there is something relatable in there. And so I think for the words, the story you're trying to tell, grounded in some level of consistency with what's happening in the world today, or the world as it exists that somebody can relate to. Even if it's a carriage ride, around Central Park in New York. We've all seen those in the movies. We've all seen on TV. Any of us that's been to New York near the Plaza Hotel has seen those carriages parked there to give, a couple a ride. It grounds it. Okay, now I know where I'm at. You've painted the room enough for me to believe the rest because it's grounded in authenticity of what's happening in the world today.
Well, Johnnie, thank you so much. That was fantastic insight on author branding.
My pleasure.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's interview with romance author and marketing expert, Johnnie London. Be sure to check out our website for more videos. Wishing you all a fulfilling and successful writing journey.